So it's recording. People are logging on. That's great. Okay, let's kick this off. So good evening, everyone. Great to have you joining us. I assume many people who are in the previous session are joining us again, so you can maybe switch off for 60, 90 seconds as I pretty much cover the same things as I covered before. But welcome to this evening's panel, which is a discussion that's going to focus on pathways to ownership, which is always very exciting. It's a great session planned here with a discussion with some super smart people in the industry, and I can say that because I've heard some of them speak and present before. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Daniel Oyston, and I'm a marketer by day. So mostly I work with small and medium businesses, but some of you may recognise my voice as the host of the Guild's PBCN podcast. I'll move pretty quickly here. We don't have a lot of time to get through the agenda and a lot of great questions. So the sooner we can get to those, the better. We would love for you to be involved in the discussions. If we've got time, it's always great to get those questions. It's definitely how you get the most out of it. So please just put them in the chat at any time. We'll keep an eye on those. We'll pose those to the panelists. Trust me, I've done loads of webinars and hosting panels in my time, and I can tell you that the guests actually love to have that interaction and that validation from you. So please don't be shy. Pop your questions in the chat anytime. I'll work it into the session somehow for you. But if we run out of time, I'll make sure we connect you with the right panelists who can help give you an answer. So let's introduce our panelists. What I'll do for each of you is I'll pass over to you. Just spend a minute or two just introducing yourself and let us know what you do. Natalie Isaac, you're in my top left-hand corner of view here, so we'll start with you.
Yeah, my name is Natalie Isaac. I'm actually a new business owner here in at Chemist Works Edmondson Park in Sydney. I've opened up this shop just over 12 months now.
Excellent. And what about you? We'll stay on the Natalie theme. Natalie Sirianni.
Hi, Daniel. My name's Natalie Sirianni. I'm a pharmacy business broker, which means that I sell pharmacies. My company is called Attain Business Brokers, and we operate throughout Australia, so selling businesses all over Australia. And I've been doing that for about 10 years now.
Excellent. And what about you, Tim? I'm impressed that you've worn the uniform because nobody else did in the previous session, so I'm glad somebody did.
I'm just home from work, so I am a pharmacy owner and I work in Raymond Terrace, just north of Newcastle.
Excellent. And also, Elise, good evening and welcome. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, my name's Elise. I am a pharmacist owner. I live in Kalgoorlie and I own 4 pharmacies in Kalgoorlie, and I've been here for 15 years and an owner for 15 years.
Excellent. I went to Kalgoorlie once. Doesn't look like your background.
No. I am in a very nice place.
Very good. And last but definitely not least, what about you, Belinda? Welcome. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having me here today. I work at the Commonwealth Bank. I head up our strategy and insights team in CommBank Health. And one of the things that we do is look at and work with our bankers on how we lend to the sector, as well as doing a few other things like producing insights reports on the sector and working with pharmacies on, how they can improve their businesses.
Excellent. Let's jump back to you, Natalie Isaac, with the serious questions. Let's start to get into it a little bit. The journey from initially starting out as a student pharmacist to moving to be in charge or even a pharmacy owner like yourself, it's different for everyone. What did your path look like?
Well, I was working with with the employer who now I'm in partnership with, Mr. John Bronga. You would have heard of him. For about 12 years. I managed the Wheadon Park store that we have, which runs 24 hours for a total of 6 years. And very early in my management, I was very forward with wanting to become an owner. That was ultimately my dream. And so when the opportunity arose, he brought it to the table and I took it up.
Excellent. Is it hard to make that, how do I phrase this, to be really upfront that, hey, boss, one day I want to be an owner? How important is that to actually get your opportunity, i.e. don't be shy about it because people can't help you if they don't know?
100%. I think that's pretty much key. Being especially a young female pharmacist, I had many, pharmacists that were sort of older than me in the group. So it's extremely important to be vocal. Don't assume that, you know, your current employer knows. They can't read your mind. So definitely be vocal about it, because you never know what opportunities they might be, you know, aware to. So yeah, definitely be vocal.
Excellent. And what about you, Elise? Did you grow up in Kalgoorlie, or did your pathway take you there?
Well, I've lived in country for most of my life. I was born in Wheadon and lived in Port Hedland, and you know, did most of my studies in Perth. And then after uni, I went to Wheadon again and worked there for a year. And then my partner got transferred to Kalgoorlie. And then within 6 months, I got offered partnership. So they identified really early that I was pretty keen and interested in growing. And yeah, so I've been a partner in Kalgoorlie for 3-4 years, and then I bought my partner out, and now I sole own all the pharmacies in Kalgoorlie.
Excellent. And what's your pathway look like, Tim?
So I graduated in 2012, and I'm from the Central West in New South Wales, and I've always wanted to own my own business and run it. So I worked for some great pharmacists and some great pharmacies out the Central West, and was just looking around for pharmacies for sale, and ended up finding a store up in Roman Terrace. So by 2017, I became an owner up there. I've got 2 business partners that work in other stores in New South Wales and Canberra, and yeah, I'm the major partner up here in Roman Terrace.
Excellent. I'll stay with you, Tim. Tell us a little bit about owning and operating a pharmacy in a regional, or for want of a better phrase, a rural area. You said you always wanted to own your own business. Was owning a community rural pharmacy always the focus, or were you open to anything? And ultimately, now that you're there, how's it shaped you as a pharmacist working in community pharmacy in a rural area?
I think, look, definitely Kalgoorlie is probably a lot more rural than me. I was working in the Central West, which was rural as well. We have some, you know, I'm 20 minutes out of Newcastle, but still access is quite hard for our demographic. It's a low socioeconomic area, and so access to hospital, doctors, facilities is quite hard. So I've never really been drawn to working in a major city. I've always grew up in the country and wanted to stay out regionally. So looking for a smaller town to move to was part of my agenda, and looking for stores.
Excellent. What about you, Elise? You mentioned that you moved around a little bit. Was owning a rural or a regional pharmacy always the goal? And ultimately, how has it shaped you as a pharmacist as well?
Not so much owning in rural, but definitely owning, and the opportunities, I think, are probably a little bit higher in rural areas than what they are in the city. But I started in pharmacy when I was 15, so I've been in pharmacy for about nearly 30 years, and I don't think I could ever go back and practice in the city. I think that the scope of practice in the country is just so much more broad, and being an owner in a rural town is really good, because you can see all the gaps, and then you can actually see how you can help to fill those gaps, or help to advocate for the gaps to you know, expand the pharmacy's professional impact. You know, I'm quite close with a lot of the local MPs in town, and often speak to them about the issues that we're having, so that they're aware and aware of how pharmacy can help to fill those gaps as well.
I think you make some good points, and just sort of bring it back into our view or our conscious for the people that are the delegates who were on the last session, because you reiterated a couple of points that the panelists made in the last session around the scope of practice. And I think it might have been Luke from Wagga who said that, you know, as a pharmacist in some of those areas, you are a real linchpin of people's health and access to those those sorts of services, because we don't have that many doctors and hospitals, and as Tim mentioned, like only 20 minutes out of Newcastle, and it's still sometimes difficult. But also that comment around looking for opportunities in your community and helping fill those gaps. So it was great that you could underline some of those messages from the session before. Tim, jumping back to you, as you said, you're always keen to be a business owner, get into pharmacy ownership right after completing university. Is that a realistic goal for people? And if so, when should they start planning?
Yeah, it's a realistic goal. If you want to own your own store, you definitely can. It's all about surrounding yourself with the right people. If you want to own your own pharmacy, like what Natalie said, make it known, tell people what your goals are. People might laugh at it or think that you're too young, or get some experience under your belt. I think every day you're turning up is experience. So if that's an ambition for you, then just let it known, and you'll end up meeting people that have the same ambitions or aspirations or have been through similar processes, and you'll learn from them and get good experience. Like all the previous pharmacies that I've worked for, I've gone to those stores because they've had young owners, female owners, early career pharmacists. They've won awards, they've been Pharmacy of the Year, those kind of things. And you're drawn to those environments because that's what you want to do yourself. So when you get into those environments, you meet the right people and you can help with the finance and get funding and that kind of thing to get in. I mean, nobody's got $1 million. That's why we have banks. And we treat it like monopoly money, borrow some money and that's how you'll get in. But I think it's definitely something that is achievable for anyone as early as you'd like it. You've just got to have the drive.
I was watching Belinda very closely there as you made those comments. She was shifting in her seat. She's a bit worried there. But Belinda, you've got all the money that we need to buy a pharmacy. But I remember when I was the age of the delegates on here, just finishing uni, second, third year uni. It was a long time ago. But I was super poor. We used to have this Chinese buffet in the refect at university, and I used to buy boiled rice and steal sweet and sour sauce just so I had something to eat. I would never have ever dreamed of being able to own a business and have access to any sort of money to be able to facilitate some sort of purchase. So to follow on from Tim's answer, which he said it is a realistic goal, what are some of the steps that the aspiring owners who are logged on here today can take to improve their financial standing for a pharmacy purchase or a partnership opportunity as an initial step?
Yeah, I love what Tim said when he called it monopoly money. I might start using that in some of my conversations. But I also loved what Tim said about surrounding yourself with people who can be your advisors, who can be your mentors, who can help. You can learn from their experience, because you might find it interesting, but that's, as a bank, like, you may not have had a lot of experience, or you may not have owned a pharmacy before, but we want to make sure you've got that support network around you. So when something happens that you don't expect, you've got people you can go to and turn to and get advice. If I think from a financial perspective, it's like anything, understanding what your financial situation is paramount. So, do a personal budget. What is going out? What is coming in? The last thing a bank ever wants to do is give you that monopoly money and you not be able to make your repayments, because that's not good for anyone. So what we will do is we'll ask you a lot about your personal situation. So what is your income? What are your personal expenses? What other loans are you having? And really thinking, is this a good time for you to enter into, to take an additional loan to get to that next step? I think then when you think about your business, if you're acquiring a business, you really want to make sure that decision that you make you really understand that business, that what you're getting into, and especially what it's going to mean long-term from a financial perspective. Because ultimately, I think, you know, not only when you think about what your goals are when you're acquiring a pharmacy, I'm sure they're for reasons in serving local community and community ties, but I think ultimately everyone wants to make a profit and have, you know, be able to get that elusive work-life balance. So I think it comes down to really understanding what's the ins and outs of a financial position.
It's good advice. What about you, Natalie Sirianni, to follow on? What sort of steps can the aspiring owners who are listening now take to sort of improve their financial standing?
Yeah, sure. And I think as Belinda said, like the people you surround yourself, and Tim as well, are really critical. Another thing which I'll just add on to there, like from a numbers point of view, just to give you an indication for what it kind of looks like. The average pharmacy purchase price is over $2 million. The bank will, in general numbers, lend you about 70% of that, and then you have to come up with the remaining 30% of the pharmacy value yourself. So looking at that, that's quite overwhelming. As Dan said, his boiled rice might have not got him that kind of money to be able to do that. But a really good way to do it is partnership. And you know, as you can see, pretty much everyone on this call has got in through partnership initially. And then, for example, Lee said earlier, then she purchased out her partner and now owns outright. That's a really good way to get into it. And what that means is that you won't need as much money to buy a bigger pharmacy generally. You'll just get a portion of that. But what it also provides is mentorship from the senior partner to do that. And generally speaking, from a monetary point of view, partners will have the option of vendor financing you in. So you don't have to put as much money up front. And we find that that works really well in pharmacy as long as it's the right opportunity. And that's what I really, important point there, that it has to be the right opportunity. It has to be good financially and obviously operationally for you as well. But partnerships are a really good way to go about it because you don't need to put as much up front. And that's how you can get into pharmacy relatively early with not too much money on the table. And particularly in this market where it's tough to get pharmacists and the workforce is an issue for not just rural, but metropolitan locations as well. I'm getting calls daily at the moment for owners looking for junior partners. So if you want the opportunities, they are there. There's plenty out there if you want that.
And I think an important point for, can you guys still hear me?
Yeah.
Yep. Just give me 2 seconds. So the internet was just a bit sketchy. Hopefully that's okay now. The point I was going to pharmacists that there are, like Natalie, who want to have these conversations with you, that want to help go on a journey with you. Not only is it their job, but they're super smart. Now, moving to you, Natalie Isaac, at last year's summit, Tim encouraged students to get into pharmacy ownership early. What advice would you give to students who are looking to take the plunge?
Sorry, I couldn't hear you there. I missed that.
That's okay. Just give me 2 secs, guys. I'm just going to plug my internet into the modem.
He's doing dial-up. I heard the end of that. What would your tips be to get for those that want to get into pharmacy ownership early? Is that what it was?
Yeah.
What are my tips? Oh, okay. Let me think about it. Definitely, like I said, speak to someone, well, the person you're working for. Make sure you make it known to them that you are interested in a partnership. That's extremely important. As a first, look at your finances, see if you can get those sort of in line. There could be maybe family that can help loan you some money as well if you're in a little bit of a tough position. So maybe asking your parents as well, or a family member can help. But yeah, just making sure the place that you're currently working at, that once you have that conversation, it will be made known to you whether there is going to be an opportunity for ownership or not. So it's good to have that conversation early on. so that, you're directing your energy where it's required. And I mean, my advice would be to try and get into a management role first. It really does allow you to get a better understanding of the whole business, both retail and dispensary, and getting a feel of, how much you can actually manage the whole business. And I feel like once you do that well, and then it just, it gives you good foundations to be able to run your own business.
Yeah, it's great advice. What about you, Elise? What sort of advice would you give to students looking to take a plunge?
I think that exactly what everyone's said. The earlier you get in, the better. I think that you need to choose your partner wisely. I was really lucky with the partners that I've had, but I think that you need to make sure that you are going into partnership with someone whose values are aligned with yours, and also who you can work really well with, set really good strategies around who's going to do operational, who's going to do forward planning. I think all those discussions are really, really important to have really early on, so that everyone knows where they sit and who's responsible for what. And I think probably the biggest thing that I wish that I had done was do more HR training. So I think HR is the biggest thing. I think like being pharmacists, we're quite smart. We can see opportunities in different business aspects. We're quite attuned to people's needs, but we're also very empathetic. And I've been stung a few times being too nice to employees, not having appropriate guidelines and barriers, and then you also get into the situation where you need to performance manage someone, and making sure that you know what the current guidelines are, and make sure you're doing everything 100% according to the guidelines. So I've actually found the guild really helpful, because I've been in 15 years, there's been a couple of really sticky situations, and the guild has been amazing at guiding me through, even to the point where they'd actually write the letter that I actually need to send to someone to make sure that it ticks all the boxes. So HR is by far the hardest thing. The rest of it is amazing. HR would be like the biggest thing that I'm constantly learning about.
And I think it's a point that's lost on a lot of, and I don't want to sort of be taking a tone or sound like an old man, but I think that the HR, the managing the people, the understanding of that is as you move higher up management trees, ladders, and ultimately you become an owner. I can tell you that it doesn't matter what industry you're in, a large part of it becomes about managing the relationships with the people that you have working for you. So it's a good point that you make. What about you, Tim? What sort of advice do you give to students who are looking to take the plunge?
I think the difference now as an owner as to the difference as a student or when I was working as an intern or a pharmacist is that it's actually reality. Like I used to turn up to work every day and treat work like it was my own business. I wouldn't overstep the mark. There were barriers, but I was making decisions that were going to help the business. But I think with pharmacy as well, if you go in there and you look after your patients, they will look after you. So if you're helping them in the right way, you're giving the right advice, you will get return patients. So that's a natural thing. So going into the pharmacy and looking with your eyes open and seeing problems, fixing them straight away, treating it like it was my own shop, I think was really great experience, because if I didn't understand what was going on or I was thinking I wanted to do something, I'd just ask for help. So the 4 years that I had working as a pharmacist before I became an owner was like my training wheels. So when I started, it was actually no different. The first week of ownership, I remember sitting back going, oh, that was no different. Apart from the long hours of transitioning, the store across, that was no different to any other day in the pharmacy. So, if you go in there just and do your best and treat your job now, whether you're a pharmacy student or you're doing placement, if you're treating it like what would it be like if I owned this store? You'd be able to run it. And that's how you'll step up into the management positions and go forward to ownership. Is just, you know, treat it like it was you. And then when you are an owner, you actually realise you're still talking to the right, you know, to people that know their thing. You talk to the bookkeepers who will look after a lot of the bookkeeping. You know, you're leaning on other people that are the experts in their field, and you still are the expert in pharmacy. And every day I'm on the floor working. I'm not in an office. So yeah, to me, the transition was, you know, I think you're looking at profit and losses and a lot more reports, but, you know, the day-to-day is still pharmacy and pharmacy services.
Excellent. Now, we've got a fair few questions that have come in. I think I count 5. Well, quite often when you run these things, people just don't ask any questions, and I have to come up with a few at the end. So what I might do is sort of, I've got some things that I've been wanting to ask you and some questions, and I've sort of picked who I would like to pose those questions to. But I might ask one more, and then I might just jump over to the ones that have been answered, because clearly they're pressing, and then I can come back to the other ones that I'm thinking about asking people, and we can take it from there. So the key one that I want to ask first, before we move into the questions, is for Natalie Sirianni. Is pharmacy a financially rewarding, or pharmacy ownership a financially rewarding opportunity in the current market? And I mean, look, if I was to dumb that down to the essence of the question, can I make a good living out of it? Can I, you know, everybody wants to be rich and more comfortable, but is it financially a good option for people? And I think it would be also good, you know, based on the work that you do day in, day out with people. You sell and buy pharmacies and help facilitate that transaction. A lot of the delegates probably are thinking, yes, ownership would be a great opportunity for me, but sooner or later they're going to sell it. So I would love to hear about sort of what growth you see across pharmacies over what periods, because ultimately it's an appreciating, or it should be an appreciating asset that people are going to sell long term.
Yeah, great question. And I love talking about this. It's one of my favorite topics. So financially, and obviously I'm cutting out all the benefits you get from owning a business and the teamwork and, you know, servicing the community and things like that. Financially, it's a fantastic asset. So just to give you some numbers on that, the average pharmacy return that you will get per annum on the business is between 12 and 20% of the price that you pay. So of the price that you pay, every year you're going to get between 12 and 20% annually on your return. Now, that assumes that you pay 100% cash for the business. Now, as I mentioned earlier, you're not paying 100% cash for the business. Belinda's coming in to help out, and you're going to borrow about 70%. So of the money that you put in, the return on equity, which that's what that means, is the return on the money that you're actually putting into the investment. On average for a pharmacy, it's between 35 and 40%. Now, that kind of investment return you don't get in any other industry. So if you compare that to shares, if you compare it to real estate, property, whatever, it's a fantastic return. So I'm jealous because I can't own one because I'm not a pharmacist, right? So from a financial point of view, it's a great investment. And a lot of people look back and say, oh, it used to be a great investment. That's not true. It's still a fantastic investment today. Now, growth levels have come down. So historically, growth levels in pharmacy were fantastic. So the appreciation that you got year on year, and just to be clear, those returns that I mentioned, that's not including any capital gains. That's just the annual return that you're going to get on the business. That growth has slowed down. Through COVID, it's actually improved. So the capital gains that people are getting are growing because profit levels are growing. And from my point of view, I think COVID has been fantastic because it opens up a whole new range of earning potential from a financial point of view, but also serviceability or professional services that you can offer within your pharmacy. And they're all going to be growth areas moving forward. Like, they're not taking any of those back. So opportunity wise, huge opportunity for the future. And COVID's been really beneficial to pharmacy. Even take that all out of the equation financially, it's a very sound investment. My one caveat on that is you have to make sure that you buy the right pharmacy and you do your due diligence, because at the end of the day, it is a lot of money. So you can't afford to make mistakes. And so you've got to make sure you deal with experts in pharmacy that know what they're doing, and also do your own research as well, so that you understand what you're putting money into. But if you get it right, it's bloody awesome.
Well, what I took out of that, Natalie, was that I should have married a pharmacist. Anyway, moving on, we've got a question here from Samantha. Sam has asked here, I'm not too sure if this will be answered later. Well, we can answer it now, Sam. But I was wondering logistically how much of a pharmacy you should buy into. So Sam's heard that if you don't own enough of a pharmacy, you can get shot in the foot. And I think that's probably a reference to a percentage of shareholding. So whether it's 50-50 or if you go only 25% with somebody and somebody else is a major shareholder. And, you know, for those playing along at home, shareholder agreements can be structured a whole lot of different ways and give you voting rights and power and all that sort of stuff. And so Sam's initially, we'll start with you, Natalie. Sam's initially asking around, you know, what sort of percentages should you be moving into if you're going to partner with somebody? And then are there advantages to different percentages? So, for example, if she was to take a small percentage, but then maybe take more bonus or pay, or vice versa. What are your thoughts?
Are you coming to me, Natalie?
Oh, sorry. Yes, Natalie Sirianni, and then we'll go to Belinda, because it's such a finance question, but I might then bounce back to Natalie Isaac about the percentage and the partnership aspect.
Perfect. So if it was me, I wouldn't look at anything below 20%, because for anything less than that, you don't really have a say of what goes on, and it's a very minor percentage. Now that varies. If it's a huge business and you're getting offered 10%, then it might make sense. But as a ballpark, I would use 20% as a starting point. There's also other ways you could do it. So you could buy 10% in the first year, and then that ramps up each year to buying more and more. And that's often a good way to do it. But if it's less than 20%, I would have a bit of concern about it. Again, it could be the size of the business is big enough to make it worthwhile, but I would definitely have a question mark associated with that. I think just onto your other point, I think a key thing that Elise mentioned earlier is about when you're in partnership, having roles about the operational side as well as the partnership side. So a partnership is really critical that you do have a partnership agreement in place there, but also an operational agreement in place there as well, around who's running the business and how much you're getting remunerated for your time as well. So you could have, 50% stake in the business, but you could be earning really low wages, which doesn't make sense, particularly if in a rural location or things like that. So you have to look at it as a whole package. So not just the percentage for what you're buying in, but also those other things. And like I said, it could be that you buy in low and then ramp it up as well. But if, just as a key metric, anything below 20%, I'd be a bit skeptical of.
Yeah, excellent. What are your thoughts, Belinda?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and it actually changes the way that the bank will fund depending on the percentage that you have. So if you've got a 20% funding, the bank will, we might fund your equity part, but we're going to be looking more at what your personal financial situation is. Whereas if you buy 100% of the business, we can then take security over that business, which means we will take a more in-depth look at the performance of the business. Whereas if you've got only a 20% stake, your other partners aren't going to want the bank to take security of the pharmacy, because they also have partnership. They also have a partnership of it. So it goes back to what Natalie said, that often it's that way to get in as a first-time pharmacist. You don't want to put you don't have as much capital to put in, so you'll get a smaller percentage, but the bank will look at funding it differently. But then if you do the whole bet, the bank has more security, but it also means that it's a lot larger loan, it's a lot larger risk, and it's something that the bank will take a lot more scrutiny over. So, I think I agree with Natalie that 20% is a good amount to start, but then you've really got to think about the financial implications of how, if you do go 100%, do you have the experience? Do you feel confident running a pharmacy by yourself? will your bank be able to help you fund the, up to 70% of that total value of that pharmacy?
Yeah. Natalie, Isaac, I've actually got a better question for you later. So just I'll hold fire on you, and I've got a good one here that's specifically asked to you. But I might ask you, Elise, you said earlier, correct me if I'm wrong, that you initially were a partner and then bought the partner out. Is that correct?
Yeah. So
in terms of a structure, was that a pathway or an outcome or an end game really that was always spoken about and was structured with time, or did you go into the partnership and then just sort of see how it went and then had those conversations?
So I originally started off as a 10% shareholder, but the pharmacy in Kalgoorlie is huge. So if it was a much smaller pharmacy, then I do agree 20% is where you'd start. But I was vendor financed in as well. So that definitely helped me.
Sorry to interrupt, Elise, just for people who might not know, what does vendor financing mean?
Yeah, so that meant that I didn't actually have to come up with any cash to be able to get into the business. Basically, the business was self-sufficient enough that it could hold my equity, and then I paid that off in the business. So and then so starting off small, and then we had a couple of changes in partners. So then I grew to 20%, and then partner decided to retire, and I managed to be able to take out the other 80 to get the whole 100%. So I think it's good to know where you want to go, but you also have to be able to be quite flexible and speak with your partners so that you know what their outcomes are. And their timelines around, if they're wanting to retire or they aren't wanting to stay in pharmacy, and whether they want to participate. So if they're not wanting to participate actively in the business, then they might want to reduce their share, and you might want to grow your share if you're taking on a larger percentage of responsibility in the business. So yeah, it all comes down to really having a good relationship with your business partner, and really open and frank conversations, so that you're both getting what you need out of the partnership.
Yeah, and I would 100% reiterate that. I've owned businesses in the past where there was multiple shareholders, owners, we're all working in the business, and it's really important to have that stuff documented, but then actually having conversations around those things. It's not good enough to go into a business and not really have it down on paper about what happens if A happens, what happens if B happens, what happens. Tim, one for you, somebody here, they're anonymous. I'm hoping to someday own a pharmacy. I'm still in the first year of my bachelor degree. Am I wasting time by not being too sure about wanting to own a pharmacy or not being very adamant about it?
Sorry, just with that question, there was a few different parts there. So not sure about being a pharmacy owner. Is that what the question was?
So they're worried. I think the question is ultimately around, they must be studying pharmacy, but they're still in their first year, not really sure whether ownership is for them. So I think the question, the basis of the question is, I mean, I might be putting too fine a point on it, but is pharmacy for me if I don't want to own a business? I.e., is the only career path really owning a business?
No. I think some pharmacists don't want to own businesses. Some want to manage. Some want to work in the hospital system. Some want to do research. In our pharmacy, sometimes our pharmacists won't even step foot in the dispensary for the whole day or maybe 2 days because they're doing professional services or medical checks or other things. So I think the first thing would be is get a job in pharmacy, see if you like it, have a look around. If you don't like the job that you're doing, find another job, try another pharmacy, see if it was just that pharmacy or do you not like the industry. But I think it's definitely worth getting in if you haven't had any experience in pharmacy, whether it's in community pharmacy or working at the hospital or working at clinics or in allied health. It's definitely worth getting in there and doing some experience and getting a job. It's good to get a bit of cash as a uni student as well. But I used to work all my holidays in different pharmacies, and it was really diverse. It was really good to get a hands-on approach and meet a whole lot of pharmacists, a whole lot of pharmacy assistants, and see what everybody did. And I loved it. But I think any pharmacist or pharmacy student that I've met has really thrived with pharmacy, because let's face it, at university, you don't get to see, you're stuck doing chem and a few other things, but you don't actually get to see real pharmacy practice.
Yeah, I think it's one of the real challenges of society is that people finish year 12 and people are like, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? Have you made a decision? And I think I want to be a pharmacist. But, you know, ultimately you do have to get out there and sort of, for want of a better phrase, get your hands dirty and do work and in different pharmacists and really see if it is for you. Because, you know, people look at careers and go, a pharmacist is this, but a pharmacist is much more about that. And there are different pathways. And we've heard plenty of people speak about some of the really cool projects and innovative things that they're working on. Natalie Isaac, let's find your question. It says, again, it's from an anonymous person. Hi, Natalie, you mentioned communicating with our pharmacy owners about our desire to be a partner early on. How early should this be? I am still a university student. Should I wait until I'm an intern or a registered pharmacist before I should have those conversations?
I know both Elise and Tim said, you know, you can have it as early as you want. And I definitely agree with that. But I do feel like you should at least become a registered pharmacist. See how you like, you know, becoming a pharmacist, how you can handle it. Being a pharmacist itself is quite stressful and it's a lot of responsibility. So see how you can handle that. And then after you've become a pharmacist, step up and say, you know, I want management and I do aspire one day to become an owner. But I feel like definitely becoming registered and becoming a pharmacist and growing your responsibility slowly. But, you know, once you've become registered, put your hand up, say, I'm interested in management. And then from then on, have that conversation about ownership.
Excellent. And there's just another question that's come in. It's from an anonymous person. I assume you'll be able to hear me. They've said here, it's a little bit of similar to the previous question. How can I know if ownership is for me? I'm very hesitant about the responsibility. But I think, Natalie, you just gave some great advice about sort of stepping into it and growing into it. So the person that submitted that question, if we haven't answered that for you, please let us know. Belinda, a question for you before we start to round this up. Did the bank make any interesting observations around community pharmacy in the industry during the pandemic, which would be useful for people to understand if they're looking to buy a pharmacy?
Of so many industries, pharmacy was viewed as one of the best industries through the pandemic. And I think what the pandemic really showed, and we just recently released our pharmacy insight reports that's available online, was the role of community pharmacy in the community. As Natalie mentioned, the values of pharmacies have gone up as we've seen things like additional services through the rollout of vaccinations and things come through. And what that is, at first we all thought this would just be a one-off, but I think what COVID taught everyone and government community is just the role that community pharmacy can play for these really important health initiatives. So we have a really positive view on the industry, and we can see community pharmacy just continuing to grow.
Excellent. Natalie Sirianni, I'm going to ask you your final question. Then I'm going to go back to the owners and sort of ask them to a question to help wrap this up. The question for you, Natalie Sirianni, what are some of the common mistakes that first-time buyers make, or if people that are thinking about ownership, they should be wary of, because they obviously want to avoid them, from a financial business standpoint?
Sure. Yeah, I think probably the toughest thing as young pharmacists is sometimes it can feel like there's not that many opportunities out there, and it can be difficult in some sense to come by opportunities. So often we see the ones that end up in trouble, and often, unfortunately, they do then come back to us when the trouble hits, and then we have to try and sort it out. they probably got too excited or a bit impatient and jumped at the first opportunity, or maybe had been looking for a while and not many were coming around. So then they just jumped at the first one that got there without actually checking if it was the right opportunity and doing their due diligence on it. And as I mentioned earlier, it's big dollars. So if you do get it wrong, it can have the impact. Doing your due diligence means checking the opportunity, checking the financials, making sure all the legal everything's in place correct from a legal standpoint, and all those things are really critical. And I definitely encourage everyone to use expert pharmacy advisors, because there are, accountants and solicitors that know a lot about other industries, but don't have the understanding for pharmacy, so can miss some important things. So being patient and making sure that the opportunity is good from a financial point of view and from a risk point of view is really the most important thing. And like I said, engaging with advisors in the industry. We're so lucky in pharmacy. There are so many accountants, solicitors, finance brokers, bankers that specialise in pharmacy. So they really know what they're doing, and that will help you ensure you're protected and don't make the mistakes that could cause problems later down the track.
No problem. Well, guys, I think we're going to run a little bit over time. And I mean, I'm sure Annika at the Guild is okay if we run a little bit over time. If people don't want to stay past 8 o'clock, they can jump off. But there's some more questions that are coming in. So I'm happy to keep going and answer them as long as the panelists are. And, I'll only try and keep you 5 or 10 minutes. Are we cool with that, Annika?
Yeah, that's fine. This is the last session. So go ahead. Yep.
Super. The only thing I'm worried about is I can smell people eating dinner in my house, so I'm missing out. Natalie, I'll stay with you just really quickly. Then I'm going to move to you, Belinda. Then I'm going to come to you, Elise, Natalie, Isaac, and then Tim. Natalie, is it true, this is a question that's come in, is it true that there are too many community pharmacies and therefore it's harder to own a pharmacy? So like more in terms of location?
No, in general, no. There's plenty of opportunities out there. There's certainly a lot of industry moves that happen and things like that, but 100%, particularly in this market, partnership opportunities, there's so many out there. There is limited supply of pharmacies, which means that there's only certain many that sell per year, which can mean that it is hard to get full ownership. But if you open your eyes up to partnership, if you open your eyes up to rural locations, and you might have to change your criteria a little bit for what you're looking for, but there's plenty of options out there. And I think the number of pharmacies that we're sitting at the moment, there are more coming through when the ACPA, the location rules change, but I think there's no issues with the number of pharmacies that we have, and there's plenty of opportunities out there. So I wouldn't be concerned about that. If you want to get into ownership, you 100% can.
Excellent. Well, let's say somebody wants to get into ownership. This question's for you, Belinda. With respect to capital, getting the required loans and the existing laws in place, how difficult is pharmacy ownership becoming for early career pharmacists, and how probable is it owning one without diluting ownership? And I think that last part is how probable is it that I can get my hands on a pharmacy and 100% own it, as opposed to having to dilute it with partners?
I think it depends. I think, as Natalie said, if you are committed and you want to get into be a pharmacy owner, then it's definitely something you should pursue. From a banking perspective, I think now we've got a really good view on the industry. So, it's all just about making it work for you from a financial perspective, and having that access to capital. And as I said, I kind of on what Natalie said is, the biggest thing is what you don't want to do is get into a position and because you want this pharmacy and pay too much for it, put too much debt behind yourself, which puts you in a really tough position. So I don't know if I answered the question there, but because I think it really depends. But I think I'm a believer, if there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah, very good. Elise, I mentioned in the last panel that the statistics tell us that round about close to 80% of pharmacy graduates are women, and that translates into about 70% of registered pharmacists who are women. However, There's only about 33% of you who are currently pharmacy owners. What advice or encouragement would you give to young female pharmacists and students to get into pharmacy ownership?
I think that you're probably your own worst enemy. I have 3 kids and they're all at school. I live in a regional area. I don't have any family, yet I own 4 pharmacies. So if you've got the will to own a business, you'll get there. You just, where there's a will, there's a way. And I think that you just need to know that that's what your goal is, and then there is nothing stopping you. There's so many opportunities, and as a business owner, even before I started, like, I had partners that were men. They didn't look at me differently because I was a female. If you have the drive and really want it, then there's nothing stopping you.
What are your thoughts, Natalie? What sort of advice and encouragement would you give to young female pharmacists and students who are thinking about ownership?
Pretty much what Elise said, 100%. Where there's a will, there's a way. There's nothing stopping us women. I mean, why can't we do it? There's absolutely no reason. Just got to, put your hand up and say you want to do it, have it as your goal, and don't let anything stop you.
Well, I mean, as a general member of the public, when I walk into a pharmacy, I couldn't care less whether the pharmacist is a man or a woman. It doesn't even cross my mind. So, don't let that be a limiting factor to you. Move to you, Tim, to start to round this out. What do you find rewarding about owning a community pharmacy?
I just think you get out what you put in. Like, I've had a couple of pharmacists off, so I've done some extra shifts. So, I haven't really had a break in 2 weeks, and 7 o'clock at night getting home. I love what I do. I come home, I'm exhausted, but you smile and think of all the interactions that we've had, or the people that you've spoken to during the day, and they may not have spoken to anybody. They're not getting out, they're not talking to anyone, and you've come in and you've changed their day. Like yesterday, I had a patient that thought he had reflux, but he was having a heart attack. So we got him taken off to hospital, heard back, he's fine. He's really grateful for that intervention that we had. If he didn't come into the pharmacy, he couldn't get into the doctor. He would have just stayed at home, but he had access. We helped him. And, you can go home thinking that, you've done what you've trained to do your whole career. So it's really rewarding, and then they bring in cakes and sweets and stuff. So you've got enough stuff.
Well, without oversharing too much, Tim, I had a couple of heart attacks about 5 years ago, just genetics, and some of the early, and I thought, because it was exercise-induced reflux, that's what I thought it was. And some early conversations with pharmacists meant that I went and saw a doctor and got fixed, and now totally healthy and everything's fine. So, without a community pharmacy, I probably would have just stayed at home and just done the typical male thing and thought, it'll be okay. And I might not be here hosting this panel right now. Go on.
Oh, I was going to say, we underplay these reactions, but what we say has a lot of impact in people's lives. So it's, we take that as really rewarding, and that you do that and you get that back. So it's all. That's what.
What about you? What about you, Elise, there in Kalgoorlie?
Yeah, I actually had a customer in today who is an amazing person, but unfortunately I can see the decline mentally with him, and also I'm a support for his wife. So he was having a coffee, and being able to have that long-lasting relationship with people, and you can you see the positives, and you also see the decline, but being a support for the family, and ensuring that they're taking their medications correctly so that they're getting the best quality of life they can up until the end is very rewarding.
I think one of the key things I always take away when I talk to pharmacists like yourself, whether it's on a webinar or whether I have them as a guest on the podcast, is that your job is not transactional. It's not just fill a script, get somebody out the door. And those stories that you tell around the relationships and the role that you play in the community, I think it really brings it home what the role is all about. Would you agree with that, Natalie, Isaac?
100%. It's so diverse, like with all the interactions, all the different elements that we, communicate with patients with. Like in our pharmacy, we do like sleep apnea, whether it's you compounding a medication for a newborn, and a mother is frantic having sleepless nights with bad reflux, and then you give her the medication and she's forever grateful. So it's all of these interactions that you have. You see kids that you've done wound care on when they're young, and they grow older and they come in and show you, oh, this is what's left of the scar and you did the wound care for me. So they're literally like the families, they grow with you. So you're dealing with their parents, and then the kids grow up and they have kids. So it's like one big family, I've noticed.
It's an interesting point you make about wound care, something similar. I remember my young fella broke his wrist, and typical dad, I think it's just a sprain, let's just go around and get a compression bandage and a little bit of Nurofen or something like that. And the pharmacist was like, you got to take him to the doctor, mate. And sure enough, it was broken. So if we had had compression bandages at home and Nurofen, I would have just sent him to school. So well, look, that's it's about 10 minutes over, but like fantastic chat, some great questions from the delegates. So everyone, that brings us to the end of the virtual summit. We trust that you've enjoyed the discussion and taken lots out of them. Natalie Isaac, Natalie Sirianni, Tim, Elise and Belinda on behalf of the delegates and NAPSA, and of course the Guild. Thanks so much for joining us. Always great discussions, hearing from you guys, and very insightful. There is one question here, Annika, which you might take a note on or jump in and answer, and it's around how the delegates can contact the individuals on the panel here for future advice, or if we have any questions that come up. So how would they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So after the webinar, you'll get a follow-up email. So please feel free to reply to that email with any questions you have, and we'll put you in touch with the relevant panelist.
Outstanding. And delegates, if you want any other information relating to ECP pharmacy ownership, just head to the Guild website, guild.org.au, and search for ECP for further information. Panelists, my sincere thanks and gratitude for staying on a little bit longer. I know it's getting late at night and everybody wants to get off, and poor old Tim needs to take his uniform off and have a shower and relax. So thanks again. Really appreciate your efforts. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
And thank you, Daniel, for hosting.
My pleasure.